1320 Kings Insider, creator of the Kings Beat. James Ham, what is your issue with Kenny Caraway?
Well, first of all, he's wearing a Giants hat, and I hate the Giants.
Come on, man. Stop playing.
Can't stand him. Yep, nope.
You need to come on over when it's all done, man. When it's all done, he's go to Vegas. Come on over, James. I got you. We'll go to Oracle. We'll have, champagne and campaign. Have the onion fries. We'll have a good time.
I'll pull the ripcord on baseball. I'll just be done.
I don't blame you. Oof. But you know what the real issue is with James Ham with me is I'm not a fan of creamy peanut butter.
Maybe that could be it. Yeah, I think it's good. Like, we're having discourse, right? This is how, we had really good discussions about the head coaching, the head coaching job here in Sacramento, and I think it's good. It's good to have debate. Kenny's on the wrong side of history. It's okay. I feel better about what's happened here.
Always. Wants to talk about Isaiah Thomas's 25 in the fourth quarter.
Come on, man. Come on. James, you know what game I'm talking about, right? Isaiah Thomas 25 in the fourth quarter in the 88 finals.
Isaiah
on the bad ankle.
Maybe.
Oh, come on, man. You gotta go down the NBA lane too, James. Come on, man. Stop.
Thank you. He swears that this is brought up every year. It's never brought up. No one ever talks about it.
NBA today, they don't talk about it on this day. Y'all will see.
Yes. Okay, Kenny. One time of year on the anniversary.
I even think when they do a little finals montage, they got him hitting a little shot on the 1 foot runner and then trying to gallop back with the bad ankle. They show it all the time on the finals montage. Come on, man.
You make loving you so difficult. Just want you to know that you make loving you really difficult.
It's good stuff.
Who has the most pressure on them, James, headed into this season?
Mike
Brown, De'Aaron Fox.
I'm gonna say
Halliburton.
I'm gonna say De'Aaron Fox.
I kind of thought that's where you'd go.
This is that moment where he has to show that he's the guy. Like, everyone's been waiting for the arrival. We've got to see the arrival of players like Ja. Like, where is it? Are you here? Are you going to start the season like you finished it before you got, before he went down with the hand injury? I really do. I think this is a monumental season for him. He needs to be an all-star, or at least an all-star level player. And he needs to be that from opening day all the way through, and prove or disprove the theory that the Sacramento Kings only go as far as De'Aaron Fox can take them.
I agree 100%, man. The time is now for De'Aaron to take his game and really help at least take his team to the next level. Take this franchise to another level, man. The time is now for him. I agree. He's probably got the most pressure.
The beef is over. It's all done.
Well, that was James Ham. I guess I don't know what to do now that the rivalry, now that the real heat is over between these two. Monty's the most pressure that Monty has on him this is like now, isn't it? Like, obviously you just had the coaching hire. You're not in any control over anything that happens over the course of the next 6 days when the lottery balls come out. But after that, you've got to, because I think everyone's like, okay, whether it was Mike Brown or Mark Jackson, or whether you love Darvin Ham or Will Hardy, like, cool, the coach is hired. Regardless, we've got to fix this roster.
Yeah, I mean, this is the moment, right? You got everything lined up. You got two young star-level players. You got plenty of cap space moving forward. You got your first-round picks. You got to be aggressive. You got expiring contracts. You have to convert this roster into really a playoff caliber roster, something that you can look at and go, okay, that makes sense. Because for the last couple of years, I mean, you walk into a season with 4 centers. That's not really what anyone would assume would be like a winning roster. I mean, really, 4 centers in the modern NBA when really you only need like 1 1/4 centers. That wasn't great. And we've seen super guard heavy teams. We've seen super guard heavy and super center heavy teams with no forwards. I mean, this is a moment where you got to balance a roster, where you got to do the right things, and you got to make some like definitive changes that impact the win-loss record.
James, I was talking earlier with Damian about how everybody talks about Mike Brown and what he's going to do for this team defensively, and I agree. And they always talk about the personnel. Like, we got to go get a defender. We got to go get a defender. Defensive oriented, all this other stuff. I got to thinking back to the early 2000 Kings teams, not 99, not 2000, but more so 01, 02, 03, maybe 04. And they were really good defensively, like really good. Like people thought they were all offense, but their defense was pretty damn good. But the thing about that team, if you look back on it, they didn't have a bunch of great defenders, at least what you would think of defenders individually. They had one elite defender in Doug Christie, but Mike Bibby, Peja, Chris Webber, Vlade, these weren't lockdown individual defenders, but they understood the concept that Rick Adelman had for him, Elson Turner had for him, and understand the concept of team defense. Do you think that this team could get away with something like that, or do they need more top flight defenders?
No, I think they can do it. I mean, I think that's what Mike Brown just did in Golden State. That's what we've been looking at, right? He just put together a team without an elite shot blocker, with a really good defender in Draymond Green, but again, an aging defender who's always been undersized. I mean, you got Steph Curry, you got Klay Thompson, who hadn't played in 2 years, basically on one leg. That's not a great defensive team. But when I watch Andrew Wiggins and all of a sudden he's a good defender, where he had never been like an elite defender before, and all of a sudden you're watching him, you're like, holy cow. Like, all these years that you kind of waited for Wiggins to become like who he was supposed to become when he was the first pick in the draft, all of a sudden he is that. He's just that on the defensive end. And I think that's surprising. You look at, like, overall, they're playing great defense, even though they've tightened their rotation. And even guys that would normally play as, defensive like element players, they're not even playing. So we're looking at guys like Steph Curry playing good defense, getting through and making stops in crucial moments. So I really do think that, like, if you have a defensive identity, even if this team isn't a top 10 defensive team, but they get up to, even like number 18, like, that jump would be so incredibly huge. This team hasn't been a top 20 defensive rated team since 2005, 2006. It coincides with the playoff drought. So, I think that Mike Brown can make that kind of impact, but he's got to get 100% buy-in, and he does need some more pieces, but you have athletes. You have players that can play defense. They just have to do it.
There's been a fair amount of roster turnover since Monty McNair has become general manager, and while we like to point at Marvin or Buddy Hield and all of these different guys, like, overall there's been a lot of changes in the roster, but the defense has remained consistently poor. It was poor through Dave Yeager, Luke Walton, through Alvin Gentry. I think it actually got worse with Alvin Gentry. Like, it's just bad. How much of this is in with the changeover in players, how much of this is on that coaching staff, and how much of this is on the fact that there seemed to have just been it appears there's like a culture of defensive ineptitude here?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think it's accountability. Like, the accountability issues in Sacramento have been there for a long time. And, you do need to bring in better defenders, but the players have to buy in right now. And if they don't buy in, you need to get different players. I mean, at the end of the day, I think there's only De'Aaron Fox, Harrison Barnes, and Richaun Holmes that were on the roster during Vlade's time. I mean, that's crazy. In 2 years, and not even really 2 years, more like, we're probably 19, 20 months on the job. He's flipped this roster completely. And so that's a big deal. And he needs the players that are here, although a lot of them are short-timers, they have to buy in. And that's another thing I would kind of point to. You need long-term answers right now. Like, you don't need to walk into the season with 6 players on expiring contracts. You need to convert that to, a couple of guys who are on long-term deals that are going to be here. And guys, I think what we have seen is guys like Davion Mitchell coming in, guys like Dante DiVincenzo, guys who are known around the league as defenders. And you got to keep building with guys like that, but you can't give up everything just to the defensive end. It's it's got to be entertaining basketball still too.
Do you think that
we need scores? We
yeah,
still
need scores. That's that's what I'm always going to be looking at. We need somebody to put the ball in the bucket. But when you say that these guys have to buy in the last year and a half or so, do you think it was guys who just wouldn't buy in, or there was nothing for them to buy into? Like, what I mean by that is Buddy, Marvin, if they had structure or something that they could believe in, would they have gotten into it? Or they were just walking around aimlessly because I guess with Luke, they just didn't buy into Luke. But after that, I mean, the whole season was in limbo after that. Is that more of the issue? Or is it just getting the guys in here that'll buy into almost anything as long as it's winning?
I don't think that players didn't buy into Luke. Like, all we heard about was stacking days and, all this positivity. It's just, I think when reality meets, where you are, like, and you walk into the season, you have all this positive vibe, you get to 5-5, everything's going good, then you get kicked in the teeth a couple of times, you lose Harrison Barnes for a couple of games, and this team is, like, historically the last couple of years, they're like mentally weak. They let go of the rope, and that's a major problem. And so I don't think it was a buy-in issue as much as this is their default. That was the default setting of the team before. And I guess if we find out down the road that it was the default setting of a guy like De'Aaron Fox, then there's going to be sort of a harsh reality there and criticism that gets heaped on him. But if it was just like a more of an overall team thing, we're going to see it tested right now because everyone else is gone. Harrison Barnes could be gone. Richaun Holmes probably is gone. So it's going to come down to, are they mimicking something that Fox does, or is Fox a guy who can lead these guys right out of this? And we've taken away sort of all the encumbrances, and you've given him an all-star big, and now it's game on. And so I think that's why, the opening question is so crucial. Like, how does this team get better? Who is the pressure on? It's on Fox. It is.
It feels like especially the way that you just laid that out there and reminding us how we were all fooled by the stacking days stuff. This team can't take a punch.
No.
I genuinely believe this team had an idea. Like they were bought in, and then they got punched in the mouth, and we're like, okay, fine. But for the 5th game of the season, it was like, all right, we'll figure it out next year.
Yeah, it's the here we go again mentality. That's what it is. Which, again, there's not enough players there's hardly any players left that were coached by Dave Yeager left on this team. It's only Fox and a little bit of Harrison Barnes. That's it. So, what are you going to do? It's a totally different core. Excuses have to go out the window. Bring in players that get that want to push forward and want to build something. Get them now. That's a big deal. Get high basketball IQ players, get 3-and-D guys, get long athletic wings that can shoot the three and play defense. Shape the roster right now, but shape it with the image in mind that, you have to get tougher, you got to be better defensively, and you got to build around the two guys that are really your stars.
When we talk about shaping the roster and getting guys in here, we're talking about some trades and things of that nature. And I have a hard time finding a trade where I can get a power forward that I'm looking for this team, and I'm talking about guys like John Collins, Tobias Harris, Julius Randle. Finding a hard time finding a deal where Harrison Barnes isn't involved. When the Kings look to make a deal and add to this roster via trade, can they improve mightily and still keep Harrison Barnes? is Richaun Holmes and maybe a future pick and an expiring, is that enough to get the type of talent we're talking about they need to improve that starting five? Or are we just looking at, we may have to part ways with Harrison Barnes?
You know, I'm not sure. Like, the way the league works is guys aren't available, and then all of a sudden they become available. And so you're always, like, caught up in this, like, who's going to be the next domino to fall? Who is going to ask out? Or who's going to be the guy who's on the block? And at the end of the day, reality will hit that it's someone totally different than we all thought it was. You know, just like how Sabonis became available right at the last second after, again, we had heard maybe Sabonis would be available like in December, but then all of that quieted down. He's going to be here. He's going to be here. We're building around Sabonis in Indiana, and then boom, he's traded. These things happen like quickly. I mean, Tyrese Halliburton is another example where, you know, days before, like, he is part of the core. He is part of the answer, and then boom, he's gone. So I would like to tell you that, yeah, you know, if you just look at salary and everything else, it's got to be Harrison that goes out. But I still think, you know, the Kings need Harrison Barnes and one more guy like Harrison Barnes, you know. And the biggest thing with Harrison is he's going into the final year of his deal. He's been through some brutal times here. He's highly regarded throughout the league. He's highly respected throughout the league, both on and off the court. He can go find another job next summer without any problems. The Kings have to be somewhere that either he wants to stay or they need to shop him now and try to improve the team and then still fill that void that they just lost by trading him. So I think it's a little more complex than just like, is it Harrison Barnes or bust? You know, when it comes to trades, you're going to have to manipulate this roster all over the place. You're going to have to use, you know, every single thing at your disposal, all of these expiring contracts, all of the second round picks, all of the first round picks, whatever it is that gets you these players that make sense, that help you move forward, you're going to have to do that.
Real quick, name. Do you think Harrison wants to stay?
I don't know. You know, I haven't sat down and talked to him about it. It's a little weird because we've been so separated from the guys. At a certain point, I would have told you, no, Harrison's totally fine here. But, you know, just judging by the way he answered the question about, you know, the coaching search and stuff like that.
Look, he kind of seemed over it all at that final press conference. It's kind of a little bit of a vibe I got. Like, I'm saying,
yeah, no, I think it's possible.
Like,
yeah,
I'm tired of how this is going.
I think you can save him though. Like, you can bring him back in the fold if you do the right things. It's not just about doing everything to keep Sabonis. It's about doing everything to build a culture of winning, to keep Fox happy so he doesn't request a trade, but also like to keep guys like Harrison Barnes who have proven to be really high character guys on your own roster.
Mm-hmm.
James, not that they're mutually exclusive, but with the lottery coming up next week, should the Kings win the lottery and get into the top 4, is that more attractive for the Kings to build out the roster or more attractive for them to trade the pick?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think if you're top 3, you draft. If you're not top 3, you don't. That's how I look at this draft, but I might be like in the minority there. I mean,
who's the odd man out in your top 3? Because I feel like we hear top 4 a lot.
Yeah,
Jabari and
it's the 3 big guys.
Yeah,
I mean, Chet, Jabari, and Paolo Banchero. Those are the guys.
Mahomes?
What's that?
You mean Patrick Mahomes?
Yeah, I saw that.
That clip?
Yeah. not good.
How is Paolo's Patrick Mahomes?
At the F1 race the other day, this guy goes up and he thinks he's talking to Patrick Mahomes, but he's talking to Paolo. In the middle, he goes, "Oh, you're not who I thought you were. What's your name, Paolo?"
Wow.
Maybe it's when he heard his voice and it's like, wait a sec, you don't sound like Kermit the Frog. Like, wait a sec, you're not Patrick Mahomes.
Patrick Mahomes does have a very
Patrick Mahomes. Yeah. Yeah, he's got a very, very unique voice. Yeah, I'd say my top 3 are homegrown. It's Jabari, it's Paolo, and then after that, I think it's probably Jaden Ivey. But Shaden Sharp is making some noise, and he's a guy who could climb up into that top 4, maybe, you know, top 5, and make it sort of a little bit more of a race. There's even possibility one of these guys wows during sort of the buildup here, and moves into the top 3 and bumps somebody down 1 or 2 spots, but I don't think so. The top 3 is pretty solid, and I think the Kings have to look at all 3 of them, and you judge how they would fit. And Chet and Jabari fit better than Paolo, but I still think that you look at the talent, the position of need that they have, what kind of player you would like to get from that position, and I really do think that if they were in the top 3, they'd have to draft.
I'm gonna ask you this now, and we'll probably ask you Monday because I'll forget. But what's the whole odds thing? They can't move up. They have a better chance of moving up to the top 3 than they do up to 1 spot above their losing.
Yeah. Well, okay, so they can't be number 6 and they can't be number 5.
Right now, they got the 7th worst record, right?
Yeah, the Kings can be
6, they can't be 5. Gotcha.
Yeah, they can be 1, 2, 3, 4 because that's who the lottery is, and then after that, they can be 6, 7, 8. I mean, they can be 7, 8, 9, 10, but even now that would be really, really hard to be the 10th spot. That would mean that 3 teams moved above you and pushed you back. And I mean, I know people think that could be possible, but I mean, just mathematically, it's so incredibly rare.
Yeah, but we're the Kings. That 10th spot over, and the drafting's in the Sacramento Kings. What? Like a 1 in 4 billion shot at that. Congratulations.
Yeah, someone put in the chatty house, I thought the lottery was only picked for the top 3. That was the old lottery. I think it was 2 years ago. They went to a top 4. Mm-hmm. And so now the top 4 are all up for grabs. And I don't have the numbers in front of me. And I know with the 6, it was like, man, I can't even remember now.
Percentage?
Yeah, I think they're right around like 8, 8.2, 8.4, 8.6.
You get the number 1, right?
Yeah, it's like an 8% chance to get number 1, 8.2% to get number 2, 8.4 to get number 3, and 8.6 to get number 4. Maybe I'm off there, but it's like a 32 to 33, 34% chance of moving into the top 4. And I'm pretty sure they actually have a higher percentage to move down to the 8 spot than they do to move up, or to stay where they are. They have a slightly higher percentage. And I look at this draft, and once you get past that top group of 4 or 5, it's pretty wide open. Like there are quite a few guys there that I think both fit positions of need, like the 2, 3. Or there's a potential for there to be a couple of guys that can play the 4, Keegan Murray or Tari Eason, guys like that.
Mm-hmm. Are there, my bad, Dan. Are there, I continuously say, like, if you had to, I don't want to, but if you had to move on from Harrison Barnes to get a 4, like I said, Tobias Harris, Randall Collins, something like that, I feel like you do it because I feel like you could fill that 3 spot, the 3 and D spot, wing defender, kind of a, spot up 3-point shooter. I feel like you can replace that a little easier than trying to find a stretch 4 that complements Sabonis. Is that kind of the way you see it as well, or are they about even as far as trying to fill those spots, like the ability to fill those spots?
Well, I mean, I think Harrison can be used as the 3 or the 4. That's always been the beauty of Harrison Barnes, especially next to Sabonis. We've talked about that, how when you have a guy who averages 12.5 rebounds a game versus a guy who averages like 8.5, that's a substantial difference. So putting a guy like Harrison, who's more like a 6 to 7 rebound guy, he fits much better at the 4 when you have a big time rebounder at the 5. Yeah, I mean, it is probably easier to fill in the 3 and D wing than it is the 3 and D 3 than it is to fill in a stretch 4 at this point. This draft has a ton of stretch 4s, but again, they're so far away from really being like ready. Even like a guy like Keegan Murray, maybe he can play 24 minutes a game in his rookie season, but maybe he can't. We don't know. like Tari Eason again. Like you're not going to run that guy out there for 30 plus minutes a game and expect to win as a rookie. And so that's where you have to be smart, like if you're going to swing for the fences and you're going to, again, say you moved Harrison Barnes to go get a guy like John Collins. Now you got the 4 taken care of, but there's still some good players out there that do things, like look at the model that we've seen from Memphis, where that 3 doesn't have to be some high scoring guy. It can be a guy like Kyle Anderson. It can be a guy like Dylan Brooks who can get you points, but you got the Martin twins that are going to be available this summer. Both of them have proven to be better 3-point shooters than I think we thought they would be. They're both really strong defenders. They can play the 3 and the 4. It's players like that, if I'm the Kings, that, if you're going to swing for the fence and do a high money move, you got to have some budget moves to go with it as well that make a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
James, I want to revisit a topic that you, Sean, and Brendan discussed over on the latest edition of the Kings Beat podcast. I want to talk about Mike Brown here a little bit. Lots more Sacramento Kings topics that we've got to talk about with our 1320 Kings insider, James Hamill. We'll do that when D'Lo and Casey return here on Sacramento's #1 sports station, ESPN 1320. Sorry, Jesse. It was either early or late.
Yeah, it was a tough spot. Jazz brings up this to me all the time. She's like, why are you so hungry by the time 3 o'clock hits? I don't know. Like, I'll eat right before the show. It's like, well, you just can't not eat for 4 hours?
That's funny.
I don't know why I'm so hungry at 3 o'clock.
Snacking every day.
I drink my juice every day at the same time. Habits.
Are we going to talk about the uncomfortable topic or no?
Yeah, I was gonna ask if you wanted to elaborate on that at all.
Yeah, I will. So,
okay, we'll bring that up right out the gate then.
Okay. Yeah, it's a really interesting situation that like requires major kid gloves. So got to be delicate with that.
What you wrote yesterday was pretty. Oh, that was pretty good.
It was a complete 180.
Yeah, I mean, and we can talk about it on the air, but like in those situations, like that's a nuts and bolts thing. You got to be able to write that way, straightforward, no opinion, no nothing, no editorializing, anything. And certainly, I'm not going to go get quotes from either the attorneys or anything else. To me, that just muddy in the water. I mean, the documents are what the documents are. They spell the whole thing out 100%. So,
yeah. Okay. Well, hopefully they're good. That's all that matters.
Is that farmer's market that was downtown but got moved to Arden? Is that back downtown? Does anybody know? Let me know.
The one that used to be, or the one that was on,
wasn't it under the freeway or something like that?
Oh, that one. I didn't know that got moved to.
Yeah, because they had like major construction on 50, so it moved to Arden for temporarily. But I don't know if they're done or not.
Huh. Yeah, I don't know.
Still at Arden, says J-Lo.
Oh yeah, there you go.
That's J-Lo, and I believe that's a Macho Man. Oh yeah, that's Macho Man heavy right there.
What's that from? Is that WWF magazine?
Yep.
That's funny.
Macho Man. Macho Man. Who you got tonight? Celtics or Bucks?
I'm gonna go Bucks.
Kind of got that feeling too.
Man, that's registering with me. I don't know if I'm ready to go Bucks in Game 5.
TJ Warren, like people always ask about TJ Warren. That dude hasn't played basketball in 2 years.
Man,
Like you don't want to invest in a
he might have been
28,
bumping
29, 30-year-old with like massive injury issues that has not been able to shake those injury issues.
James, do you have any suggestion on what the best rivalry has been, or what's the best rivalry in the NBA right now, in your opinion? We were talking about how Luka and Devin Booker seem to not like each other at all.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, to be honest, that's like it almost feels fake because of those two dudes. Like someone's like, "Hey, this would be good for the league. You guys act like you don't like each other." It's like,
No,
come
I
on.
don't think they like each other at all. Devin Booker don't like nobody. He don't like anybody but people on the Suns.
Yeah.
We're coming back. Yeah. Live on the Odyssey app, live on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. Of course, if you miss any part of today's show, that's a great way to catch up with us. The video streams, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. You can catch the podcast available on the Odyssey app or Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. You can get the Kings Beat podcast there as well. I want to revisit a discussion that you and Sean Cunningham and Brendan Nunez had on the most recent edition of the Kings Beat podcast. But I want to start with something that you wrote for the Kings Beat newsletter yesterday that you forwarded to us, and we were able to pass along. And that's the latest on Richaun Holmes and his non-basketball situation, if you will, the situation involving his son. You had some pretty good reporting on that yesterday.
Yeah, it's so awkward, right? Like, as a basketball writer, we get thrust into this on occasion, and it's never all that comfortable. And you got to make sure that you're watching everything that you say. You got to make sure that you go through your piece like 5 times and redact any names of children and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I took a pretty strong stance when this story originally came out. And this is it's an ugly custody battle, right? It has been and has been going on for a couple of years with these guys. And I feel for everyone involved. I even feel for, the mother that's involved here. You have to be somewhat sympathetic to the situation, but when you finally have the documents in hand, you got to let the documents do the talking for you. And I think that that's one thing that, as a writer, like, you got to pull away from any sort of, editorializing in a situation like this. I know Richaun Holmes, but I don't know Richaun Holmes like I know my brother, or I know, my close friends, or even like I know you guys.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, when you get into this and it becomes like a he said, she said, you sometimes need to wait, or every time need to wait for the thing to play out a little bit before you actually start making judgments. So I guess it's April 21st, a judge in LA County sided with Richaun Holmes and told his former wife that she was to bring their son to the courtroom the next day by 12 o'clock. And she absconded with the child and flew to Georgia, where she went to a court and tried to get another injunction because Georgia has much looser rules and much stricter punishments for some of the things that she was pitching. That didn't go over well at all. And of course, a judge, when they get into these situations, they're going to do their due diligence as well. And at that point, I mean, you're talking about a major violation of child custody. Leaving the state is huge. Defying court orders is huge. I mean, in some situations, she could face jail time for sure. Specifically if Richaun wanted to push and to get into it. But at the end of the day, like, everything that I read from all of the paperwork is pretty clear that there's just absolutely no evidence of her claims of child abuse. There's no pictures. There's a massive lack of evidence. She claimed that she was threatened via text message, whether it was from Richaun or someone that he knew. Again, there was no evidence there that linked him to anything that was on her phone or any text messages. And, at this point, Richaun has custody of his son, and he was able to fly to Atlanta or to Georgia and go get his son. I'm not sure where it was. Fulton County, I think it was. So anyway, now we're kind of left with the aftermath of the whole situation. And I'll say this, like, people who were jumping in my my Twitter threads and calling the reporter names and horrible things and all that stuff, like, that's just uncalled for. There are certain things that, I mean, do I think that it was covered well by the Sacramento Bee? Absolutely not. I thought it was horribly irresponsible in the beginning. I thought if you're going to have that news, you got to break the news first. And if you want to write an opinion piece, you better, like, have your ducks in a row and have a well-rounded idea of what your opinion should be. And so I've stayed away from it quite a bit because, these things are touchy and they're uncomfortable. And I want to make sure that everyone gets a fair shake here. At the end of the day, there's a mother out there that doesn't have her son anymore, now has like 10 hours of supervised, visits per week. And that's really hard for anybody. And, like, at the end of the day, these things happen all the time. And I just still the reporting on it. Like, how do you tell a whole story and say that you're not going to convict somebody when, number one, they weren't up for conviction on anything, but also come back with the next line and say, I believe the other person? How do you write a story about how the NBA doesn't punish domestic violence, in the league, when the Kings literally had somebody in Sacramento get an 8-game suspension? How do you crucify a franchise who didn't even know what was going on, and you haven't even done, like, the investigative work to know whether they knew what was happening or not? And again, it was all put out there and like, just in a haphazard way that I don't think it did any service to anybody, but very specifically the Holmes family. Like, like, you took them to the woodshed, and now at the end of the day, he has full custody of his son. And so it's an awkward situation. And I hope that we have more resolution down the road where it all works out and they can figure their lives out together. But, now Richaun Holmes at least has a lot of weight off his shoulders for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I echo the same sentiments. Just a tough situation. And I just hope, James and Damien, that, certain things work themselves out so they can all be a family in the way that works best for everybody, and the child has everybody in his life at all times. That's kind of what I hope for, at some point, that they can figure out something where everybody's in his life. So
yeah, I fully agree. And you just, in these situations, you have to be fair and balanced. Like, I talk about that all the time when it comes to reporting. I mean, I have opinion pieces where I can blow somebody up, where I can tear somebody down, but I still try to be fair and balanced. Even, when I write about Vivek needing to step back, it's with data that shows that his approach has been unsuccessful, right? It's not, and it's not that he's a bad person, and he's putting in the money, and he's putting in the time, and he's done amazing things, but at the same time, when it comes to basketball, like, you got to step back. So, like, it's about being balanced as much as you can almost every step of the way. And I would love to tell you that, again, that Luke Walton is the worst coach in the history of the NBA. Number one, he's got the second best winning percentage in the Sacramento era of Kings basketball.
That's wild.
So it's wild, but that's number one. So clearly there were other people who were worse in Sacramento. But on top of that, like, he didn't have rosters. He didn't have all the people that you needed to be successful. And so I want to hold people accountable for the things that they're in control of. And at the end of the day, I hope I never step out of line where I say something like what was written and just come back to be completely wrong. And, I take a cautious approach, but at the same time, it's for a good reason, specifically when it comes to situations like this where families are involved and everything else.
Well, we certainly wish Richaun and his entire family the best. We'll transition back to basketball here. You and Sean and Brendan, I thought, had a really interesting conversation on the latest edition of the Kings Beat podcast, where you were talking about, potential growing pains coming up here for Mike Brown and probably a newish version of the Sacramento Kings roster. And I know Kings fans don't want to hear anything about growing pains, and I certainly know my partner doesn't want to hear anything about growing pains and about, getting acquainted, as we all looked at the acquisition of a veteran coach as a win now move, right? That's to get better. And maybe at the time of acquiring Domantas Sabonis, it wasn't a win in that immediate moment move, but it's a win in this immediate moment move. So I think there are multiple ways to look at growing pains, James. And I think we conditioned as Sacramento Kings fans, we think those last for years. But I think there's a great example of, Willie Green, or even to a more extreme example. Willie Green works because the roster is a little bit more comparable. But the Ime Udoka as well, like that Boston Celtics team was not buying into him whatsoever. I don't know what clicked. I don't know what changed. I don't know if it was Marcus Smart's remarks about Tatum and Brown, but something happened that got them going. I wonder, given the sense of urgency that we put on De'Aaron Fox for the way that he starts the season, if this team can actually undergo those same types of growing pains that those two teams had that worked themselves out within the season, but started rocky, got going. I wonder if the pressure that we put on De'Aaron Fox will allow the team to get through those same types of growing pains and not fall into, as you put it, the, oh, here we go again syndrome.
Yeah, we have to give Mike Brown some time to teach his defensive principles. I mean, this is a historically bad defensive team.
Got training camp.
Yeah, you got training camp, and then boom, let's go. Yep. I think that there's going to be a lot of coaching that's done like during Summer League, right? So leading up to Summer League, and I know people are like, well, that's a lot of players that aren't going to be here. It's like, well, yes and no. I mean, a lot of players filter into Sacramento to be supportive of their Summer League squad. So I think there will be some moments where they do actually have, like, look, here's what the playbook can look like. I mean, his playbook is massive. You're not going to see all of that put in on day one. If you don't have high basketball IQ players or players that have played for Mike Brown in the past, probably going to have some issues. You're going to have to learn his lingo. Every coach has a different, there's so many plays that are the same, but they have different names. They have different terminologies. The Kings have to learn all those terminologies. They should be, doing flashcards at home right now, like get the playbook and start working on it and start understanding and developing like a really strong grasp of his basic concepts. But even like if we see, he ran a lot of Princeton offense when he was with the Cavs, a lot of Princeton offense when he was with the Lakers. That's a read and react system. Like there are so many layers to that onion that, day one, you're learning just basic where you stand. But, 2-3 years down the road is when you start seeing the beautiful basketball that we saw during the early 2000s with the Kings running the Princeton style offense. Again, once you get comfortable with players, it's almost like a quarterback and a wide receiver type thing where you should be throwing to your wide receivers. If you're a quarterback, if you're Trey Lance, you should be throwing to Debo and to Brandon Ayuk and to Kittles and every single one of these wide receivers every single time you can get your hands on them. You need to fly to them. You just need to have that feeling of connection. And so the Princeton does take a while, and the roster is going to be in flux. You're going to have new players coming in that need to learn what the plan is. And so the quicker you can assemble a roster and kind of have an idea of what you're going to be able to do, the better. But I also think patience is needed because, it's a new regime. You're certainly bringing in a new coach, but a veteran coach that you think can help out right away. but you also have a roster with like, I mean, I've told you guys this a couple of times. After this season, the only guys on the roster are Davion Mitchell, De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, and Richaun Holmes. Those are the only 4 players you have under contract, which means that half of this roster is going to get turned over again at a minimum, but more like 3/4 of the roster. So that's where continuity, finding guys that are going to be here long term, having them fit into a system, having them learn the system, having De'Aaron Fox learn, all of the nuances of each of the players that he's working with, where they like the ball, how they like it delivered, all that stuff. It's going to take time. And so I wouldn't expect immediate results. The first couple of months of the season are going to be learning, and it's going to be roll the ball out there and let those guys do their offensive thing the best you can, and hope that you can start filtering in the defensive mindset that really, can be a difference maker for this team. And then let the offense grow organically while the defense is really being focused on for a while.
You better learn and win. I know that much. You better learn and win. James, did you happen to see Davion Mitchell's YouTube series show, I guess?
No.
Yeah, he's got his own, day in the life type deal. And it's pretty cool. Like, it's pretty cool. It's nothing out of the ordinary, but, it's him working on his game. It's him with a couple of his guys in Miami working. And, he's doing 2 a day. He's working on his game. He did something that I've never seen before. He's watching film of his workout, like studying film of his workout.
Of his own
workout that he just had. He's watching film of it and studying it. The guy is just dedicated to his craft. Mm-hmm. And do you get a sense or like know from people that you've talked to? I know they really like Davion, but is it like he's, I don't want to say untouchable, but I say like this, unless it's a Donovan Mitchell type deal or whatever, I'm not moving on from Davion. Do you think the Kings kind of look at him the same way as like, he's part of what we're trying to build? You'd have to blow us away with a deal to get him, or is he looked at as an asset, maybe the way Tyrese Halliburton ended up being looked at?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of all of that. Like, to be honest, I think at the end of the day, they know their talent base isn't good enough. I mean, that's clear. They don't have enough talent. And when you don't have enough talent and the players on your roster are part of that statement that we don't have enough talent. Mm-hmm. I mean, because when you're saying we don't have enough talent, you're saying that, the 15 guys that I have, they're not good enough. Mm-hmm. So that means that some of them got to go in order to bring in more talent. But I don't think that they look at him as just like a true trade chip, and they're looking for a way to convert him into like a starting small forward. I don't think that they're looking at it that way. I think what they are looking at it is if a Domantas Sabonis deal comes along and you have no choice but to give up an asset like that and your first round pick and 2 years from now, first round pick and that kind of stuff, then you do it. I think, you can kind of lump him in maybe with a guy like Harrison Barnes, where it's like at the end of the day, we would like to keep him. But if we improve our roster and he's not here, then that's what we did, So, again, I think, they like him, but, we just saw what they did with Tyrese Halliburton, who they like were over the moon in love with. And they still, at the end of the day, they made a hard decision, but probably the right decision, to trade him for a player that is much further along in development.
Yeah. What's the number one thing Davion needs to work on? Is it his shot?
No, because I think his shot is really refined, to be honest with you. Like, I've watched him. Everything he does is repeatable. I would say it's really just the understanding of how to monitor your body and how to get through an 82-game season. Like, I thought that a lot of what he did was really good. We saw him develop as like a floor general. We saw him become a much better passer as the season went along. He got more comfortable. The shot itself, to me, it's like really, really solid and repeatable. I think he's a guy who's going to shoot like 38% from three for his career. And that's because not only do I watch him in practice, but I've watched enough game footage of him, whether it was at Baylor or was at the pro level. He really is a strong shooter. But, you got to learn how to adjust to the league. And this 2-a-day thing that he does during the offseason, that's great during the offseason. Have your body in the greatest physical condition possible. But then remember that, 3 games in 4 nights or 5 games in 7 nights, those things come along and they just kill you. They just wipe you out. And if you're trying to do workouts on top of that, you're just not doing yourself or your team any favors. You have to reserve some energy for the stretch. I mean, it's a huge, huge, long season. 82 games, but over 6 months, and you're just playing nonstop. And he needs to be able to monitor that a little bit better this season, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm anxious to see what year 2 of Davion brings. And like I told Damian, hey, I love me a good puff piece. And that's what this video was. But I watched him and I was like, man, I see that boy work, and I want to see what he does in year 2, man. I want to see what type of growth he can have, because I love his work ethic. I love his game. And part of being a rookie is just eventually finding time to get your feet under you, get your legs under you after a whirlwind of a first experience around the NBA. And I want to see him after he's been able to take a breath, reflect back on that rookie year, see what he wants to work on, what he wants to be better, and what he brings to the table next year.
Yeah, there's really no way to repeat NBA action, though. You can play as many games as you want, but a lot of it, digresses into pick up, wild ball flying all over the place type stuff. He needs to be on the court, with his teammates as much as possible. I'll point out, like, the guy who made workout videos every summer and always looked incredible is Buddy Hield. And at the end of the day, like, the feel for the game, it can only be developed on the court. And so again, I think that Davion is a guy who works really, really hard, and he's doing everything in his power to be a good shooter, to get from one point to the next on the floor. He's got to learn how to fight through screens a little bit better. If there was some way he could get taller during the offseason, that would be huge. But yeah.
Got to hang from the pull-up bar like Michael Jordan did.
Might have worked.
I thought it was the mailman. The 2021-2022 NBA MVP voting results are in. The best player in professional basketball for the last 4 years, Giannis Antetokounmpo, received 9 first-place votes. Joel Embiid, 26. And Nikola Jokic, the back-to-back MVP, received 65 first-place votes.
Wasn't even close.
Thought for most of the season it was going to be close. Then reporters isn't going to be close. Nikola Jokic wins going away, and Giannis Antetokounmpo gets 9 freaking votes. Amazing.
You know what that's about? It's about missing 2 players. It's about him not having Michael Porter.
Ridiculous reason to give somebody an MVP.
No, I mean, he was incredible the whole year, and he carried his team. He backpacked that team the entire way. And
he had a phenomenal year. There's no question. Yeah. It is just crazy to me that Giannis Antetokounmpo got 9 first-place votes.
Yeah. No, Giannis is incredible.
Joel. When you break it down, that Sixers team ain't that much better than what the Nuggets had.
Oh, no. That's much better. I mean,
Tobias and what?
I don't think the Nuggets had a player as good as Tyrese Maxey this season outside of Jokic.
Like 20.
What's that?
He had to carry a 20-year-old to the 4th seed.
Yeah, but he had a lot of players, man. Like, if you're missing Michael Porter, you're missing Jamal Murray all season. I mean, that's tough.
The beef is back. We thought we squashed it in the opening conversation.
The beef
now
is back.
Now the tension between James Ham and Kenny Caraway is returned. We'll try to ease out this tension the next time James Ham joins us on Friday. We hope you'll be with us tomorrow. We appreciate you, as always, for tuning in. Again, if you haven't subscribed yet to the Kings Beat newsletter, head over to thekingsbeat.com. Kings Beat podcast available on the same website, also available on Apple, Odyssey, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you get your podcast from.